Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to Canadian music in the 80s and 90s and more. Um, if you like what you see, please click subscribe and like. I'm very happy to be joined once again by Luke Doucet. Thanks for taking the time out again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You've been busy. Last time we talked, we may or may not have been able to mention you mentioned briefly that there might have been a Sarah McLaughlan tour to go on, but now it's pretty much out of the bag and you've been on it. And well, how did it go so far? I know you have more dates
Oh,
coming up, but
yeah, it was great. There were a lot of people on tour together, like 50 people. And like once you factor the band and the crew and the merchandise people and the lights and the video and audio and stage backline crew and opening act and stuff. Um, but Sarah hasn't done a big tour like that in quite a while. So there was sort of a like first week of summer camp kind of feel about
yeah,
the whole thing. And it sort of stayed that way for the whole tour. It was only like a month-long tour. But sometimes on a tour like that, it's like you're looking over there like, those two people are not getting along. That guy doesn't like you very much. And then it gets, because you're like, people think of a tour bus and they think, wow, luxury. It's like, well, kind of, but it's 10 or 12 people in a one-bedroom apartment for 6 weeks.
yeah,
It's like a pressure cooker, a recipe for Lord of the Flies.
yeah.
But it was great. Everybody got along, and Sarah was super happy and excited because so many people came out, and there was such a feeling of celebration around Fumbling Towards Ecstasy, which is 30 years old. So it was kind of just like lots of high fives and lots of like, wow, look at all these people. It's like 10, 12, 15,000 people every night. It was great.
It's been something you haven't done in a while, I guess, too.
No, I mean, the last time we did a tour of that size was probably Afterglow, and that was almost 20 years now.
Wow, it's been that long since Afterglow.
My sense of timing is the shits, but yeah, because I think it was the Afterglow tour when when I first met Melissa and I was going back out with Sarah for the first time in a decade. Yeah, so 20 years ago. Ah, man, that's crazy. Yeah, that's the deal.
It's I've seen pictures overall. It looks like it's been going pretty well. The crowds have been pretty good and um what kind of like did it take a lot of rehearsal time to get ready for it or
That's actually a really excellent question because yes, but no, because Sarah doesn't like to rehearse that much.
oh really?
So we only had 5 days of rehearsal. But Melissa and I spent months just like this, like headphones on and a guitar in my lap, just like, you know, where does that go? Oh yeah, possession. Oh yeah, that'll work. Again, you'd think that songs that you've been playing for decades, that you don't need to think about them or you don't need to practice them, but you do. And that's something to do with Sarah's music because it sounds like everything flows seamlessly from one part to another, but when you learn it, you realize that each chorus in the same song is different.
Yeah.
Starts on a different chord and it ends on a different chord. So you just a lot of little bits and pieces to remember. It's very orchestral the way the arrangements are. It's not just a matter of learning that the song has 3 chords in the verse and 2 chords in the chorus, and then the guitar solo has these licks. It's very seldomly that simple. So it takes a lot of brain work to like the way I do it at the beginning of a tour like that, or a month before, is I get the headphones on and I'm listening to the records, and I basically relearn the stuff as if I'm learning it for the first time, which is interesting because I'll end up playing a song that I've played for decades and playing it completely differently than I did the last time we toured, for better or for worse. I don't know if that's good or not, but that's what I do.
Well, you prepare the way you do, it's I guess everybody probably does it differently.
I feel like the smart people learned how to write music and they notated their parts,
Yeah.
and then 10 years goes by and they got to do the gig again and they pull out those scores and go, oh, here's my part. It goes like that. And I don't. I just do it by ear. I mean, I make notes if I need to.
I mean, I never realized like what the process is for doing something like that. Because was she playing the whole album live or?
We played the whole album live in sequence. So we did more than just the record. We did like we opened the show with, Building a Mystery and Sweet Surrender and a bunch of big songs from Solace or sorry
Right.
from Surfacing. I think 7 or 8 songs before we actually got into Fumbling, and then we ran Fumbling top to bottom, the whole
Yeah.
thing in sequence. Yeah, and then for the encore we did some other songs too.
Because I went to see the Grapes of Wrath recently, and they were doing a 35th or 30 something, anyway, an anniversary tour for their Now and Again album. And I didn't realize they said there was a lot of songs they haven't played in a long time. And I didn't realize how much work that was trying to get back into the rhythm of playing those songs again.
Yeah, I mean their stuff is also very Beatles inspired, so it's not necessarily that simple. Wait, what am I thinking of? Don't ask me wrong.
Yeah.
I love that riff.
I
A big
just,
fan, big fan of Kevin Kane's.
yeah. And he's touring with the Northern Pikes again, which I find kind of interesting. So, um,
Kind of a good blend because the Pikes always had that like, they were kind of Canada's REM,
yeah,
and
good
and
analogy. Yeah.
I can see how Kevin Kane, how they just similar kind of melodic sensibilities.
Well, I was blown away. They were playing as a three-piece when I saw them,
Mm.
which I was quite blown away by. But I mean, they sounded great. They did all their old stuff, and they played most of Now and Again, and it was great to see them back on stage together again. It was really
Yeah.
something.
Well, when they were a four-piece, it's because they had Vince Jones playing keys in the band,
Yes, that's right.
and Vince plays with Sarah now.
Oh, I did not know that.
We've been playing together for 20 years.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know he was in the band. That's interesting that I brought up the Grapes of Wrath. Um,
I
but yeah,
remember when I moved to Vancouver in the early 90s, and I was sort of aware of Sarah, and like this would be 90, I don't know, 90, late 91, early 92. I can't remember what it was, but and I was aware of Sarah and I was aware of Network, and I was totally wow, man. Yeah, all the things I wasn't.
yeah. They actually they made a funny joke about that because their drummer doesn't play on it, so he says he hates that song.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I don't think there's a bad song on it, but I've always thought they wrote good songs and did good songs anyway. But anyway, enough about their band. Are you working on anything? Will you be working on anything after the tour or before the tour, like with either Whitehorse or
Yeah. Well, actually, we're getting ready to record a new Whitehorse record, so we're just like writing songs. Melissa and I are sending each other voice. I say sending as if we don't live in the same house. We do, but we write songs sort of in a solitary way, and then we send each other our little scratchy dictaphone demos, and then we
right?
sit down and put each other's parts on them and pick at each other a little bit. So if we don't, our policy is if you're not happy with the third verse, you have to help fix it. So we do some co-writing.
Yeah.
But it's mostly sort of editing co-writing where we just go, I wonder what happens if we change that to that. Oh yeah, that's cool. And so yeah, so we're just at the point now where we've got almost 20 songs kind of in the running, and we've sort of identified a few that we think are good and some that we think are not as good. And then we're gonna go and record sometime between now and because we're going back out with Sarah in late October, early November, late October through the whole month of November for another like a full Canadian run and some casino shows in the States.
I'm gonna throw a
Um,
picture up. I don't know if you can
oh yeah,
see
there it
that.
is. I sure can.
There's
Yeah, there's the dates. So Atlantic City, Manchester, Uncasville, Connecticut, and then Boston, and then Rama, and then we're in Canada all the way through until Victoria. But uh, so before we go out, we're gonna try and record a white horse record. We probably won't get the whole thing done, but we'll get a good start. And we're going to work. We did a session at Catherine North in Hamilton, which was fantastic, and then we're going to do a session up at Jimmy Boscale's place in Coburg, and just kind of see what feels like the kind of record we want to make.
And would you tour that as well? Like do some dates for that when it eventually gets out?
Oh yeah, hard to say when. We don't have a release date yet. We're just kind of getting at it. So these things can take a while.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But I just
Yeah,
hope you come out to PEI sometime.
that'd be nice. That'd be nice.
I saw you're coming to Moncton with Sarah, which I'm really hoping to get over and see. But that involves leaving the sandbar here in Prince Edward Island and going over the Confederation Bridge. It's a big deal.
That would be ridiculous.
It's quite the planning you have to do just to get over, even though it is really only a little over an hour drive from Charlottetown to get to Moncton, but it's the whole bridge.
Psychologically, it takes a month.
Yeah, because of the bridge. Yeah. I don't know if you've driven over it before, but
I have. Yeah, yeah.
it's
I have a few times. It is. Yeah, it's interesting. I get a kick out of it, like being in the middle and realizing you can't see either end.
it's a tourist attraction in its own.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, so I'm hoping I can get over to see that in Moncton. It sounds like it's gonna be a great show. It's the closest it's come to me. You played Toronto already, right?
We did.
And what's it like?
Yeah, we played Toronto. That was great. It was the biggest show on the tour, and it was definitely a feeling of a bit of everybody felt a bit of a Canada homecoming, because most of the tour was in the US. We did the first date was Vancouver, and it was kind of a late edition of the tour, so it was great because that's where Sarah lives, and the band always based itself out of Vancouver, so that felt good. But it was kind of it was a fundraiser, and it was sort of our last rehearsal, and it was super fun. But it was a bit of like, oh my God, what are we doing? Trying to, because 5 rehearsals for a tour like Sarah is not that much. So
Yeah.
none of us was entirely sure. I mean, we did a great job. I thought we sounded really good that night, but we were all sort of biting our lips a little bit. And then Montreal is super fun, and we did Montreal on that tour too. But Toronto was right near the end, and so we really knew where we were, and we knew how we wanted to play, and it was a huge show. Like, I don't know if it was something like 15,000 people at the Budweiser stage, and just a lot of energy, and I think a real, like, to see Sarah experience that, because it was the last decade or so, and she has said things to me that made me feel like she wasn't feeling very motivated or very confident, or felt like she might be obsolete, or people weren't interested in her work. And those of us around her were like, oh my God, no, are you kidding? Like, there's lots more for you in the world. And so I think this tour sort of was very affirming for her, made her feel like, oh yeah, people want to hear what I have to do. And that's a nice thing. It sure is nice to be on stage when there's that feeling in a building, as opposed to a feeling of dread. There was no dread.
And probably lots of friends around that show too, I bet.
So many friends.
Now you guys are playing Halifax on the next leg of the tour. Is that something she looks forward to? Does she still have a lot of family and friends out there? Or?
I'm not sure. I mean, she spends most of her time on the West Coast, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how she feels about Halifax. I mean, yeah, she and I grew up on the same street
Yeah.
in South End. Not that we didn't know that, of course,
Yeah.
but we did. And so I get excited to go back. I have family and stuff, but I don't know how Sarah feels about it.
I'm gonna show some more pictures if you're okay with that.
Sure.
That looked like it just, I don't know, it just looks like an amazing stage setup to play on too.
It really was. It was kind of amazing because I haven't been on a big, like, arena style stage in a long time. And even just the technical crew, like the lights, like, again, like, it's not like we spent a month in pre-production, which a lot
Right.
of big tours will do that. We had just a couple days, 2 days of pre-production. We were doing rehearsals in a room at the Pacific Coliseum in
Mhm.
Vancouver, and then for the last 2 days, we moved into the actual Coliseum and, like, practiced in an arena. So for 2 days, they had the lights and all the audio, everything firing. And I couldn't, I remember like just looking at photographs from the first, second, and third shows, I was stunned. It's like, wow, this looks like a Pink Floyd show. Looks like they spent a month working on it. So that was super exciting. And I
Do you
guess it's
like,
sort of just a testament to how far the technology has come and how far the skills level of
sure.
technicians has evolved. And I'm kind of a Luddite. I'm like, I don't know, man, shine some lights on us. But
Like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer smaller venues or do you prefer bigger ones? But I mean, I imagine with touring with Sarah, you've got like all the technicians behind you and, to make sure everything works out well that way. As the smaller shows, are you more on your own or do you still have like a technical crew with you?
it just depends. I mean, it depends on the size of the tour and the show and the band. Like sometimes with Whitehorse, we're a 5 piece and then we have to have some stage techs, and sometimes we're a trio and we don't. Or even a duo. Sometimes Melissa and I will go out on tour, just the two of us. But yeah, it just depends on the tour and the size of the rooms and the budget and the size of the band and all those considerations. It's kind of different from tour to tour. I prefer. It's weird. I was going to say I prefer smaller venues, but of course I like playing big venues because then you feel like you're getting more love and more people are interested in your work, and that's always partly the goal. So the big dream is to play big venues all the time. And for
Sure.
Whitehorse, the dream is like Massey Hall and the Rebecca Cohen and all those theaters across Canada, that NAC and Ottawa, and we've played those venues, and we may again. Sometimes we go back to playing smaller venues. Just depends on an album cycle and where things land. But the really fun shows, the sort of visceral, sweaty, fun shows. Small room where there's 100 people, and people are kind of having a loose time. That's really fun to play music in those environments. I guess if you're playing rock and roll, right? And if people are paying attention, if people are, those small room, I don't know. If nobody's paying attention and nobody's having fun, or nobody's, if you're just an afterthought,
Yeah,
it's kind of a drag no matter what you're doing. But if people are hanging off every note and every word, small venues are pretty great.
sure. I guess for the sound too, depending on the sound, I guess, of the room.
Well, small rooms, you have to mix yourself.
Yeah,
And that's something that I quite enjoy. Uh, Whereas when you're playing a big room, you're sort of at the mercy of front of house technicians who are, if you trust them, and yeah, maybe you froze. You still there? Oh, there you
yeah,
are.
yeah. I'm still there. Yeah, because I would imagine like there's a difference between playing a place like Budweiser Stage and like National Arts Center in Ottawa, which
Yes and
has
no. I mean,
amazing sound itself, probably.
it does. It does. The national, yeah, yeah. I mean, the Budweiser stage is kind of the big open air barn that
Yeah,
it is. There's a lot. It is fun to play there. It doesn't sound, it's a little challenging, the sound sometimes on the stage under those big metal roofs that
yeah,
those sheds. But I don't know. You kind of like you play in that room and or that shed, like the Budweiser stage, and then you see like Porter airplanes taking off behind the stage,
yeah.
coming off the island, and sometimes there's fireworks, and there's maybe some weather, some rain, or some wind, or a sunset. It's like it's pretty special.
I've
I don't mind the sound being like mildly compromised when people are having an experience that's that great.
I've been there for many shows myself, and I always found the sound better when you're on the lawns.
Yeah,
I always found the sound was better. I found when you're under the roof, it was kind of echoey and muffled a little bit, but I always found
yeah,
it sounded way better out on the lawns, like it got out better, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
found it sound better. But I also reminded me when you sit on the lawns, it reminds me, did you ever go to the Ontario Place Forum when it was around before they built Budweiser Stage?
Played it.
Yeah, the revolving stage.
I played it in 1993 with Sarah
Oh,
on the
okay.
first Fumbling Towards Ecstasy tour,
Oh, wow, that's
and
awesome.
yeah, and uh, and So yeah, the stage spins, which is disorienting because your head's down and you're doing your job and you're playing. All of a sudden, you look up and like, whoa, everything's different, and it actually gives you a bit of vertigo. But I remember we used to do Into the Fire. Mm, Can't remember how it went. Anyway, um, but we did this intro, and that's amazing that I remember this 30 years ago. They used to do this intro where we kind of wanted, it was like this sort of funky funk thing, like this was right when Life is a Highway was huge.
Oh, okay.
And we're playing that riff, just sort of, the band's just the intro of the song before we got into the main riff, jamming, jamming, jamming. And I look over to the side of the stage beside my guitar tech, and there's Tom Cochran, and he's pointing, well, that's my riff, that's my riff. And he's back, he's on the stage standing beside my guitar tech. And then we're all like, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. Life is a, and then we come off after the show, and he's like, "That's my riff." I'm like, "Hey, man, it's just a funk riff. Calm down." It was pretty funny.
No, I have fond memories of that venue. Actually, I remember seeing BB King there once, and
Oh wow,
yeah, like he used to play there a lot. I also remember that's when concerts were actually pretty affordable. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
you used to basically get to go to them. I think most of them were for free if you paid to get into Ontario Place or the X or something like
yeah,
that. But
yeah.
yeah,
No, that sounds right.
they had some pretty amazing concerts there before it became Budweiser stage. But um, anyway, that's like reminiscing of old musical
Yeah,
times. I also have fond memories of the old exhibition stadium and some of the shows I saw there too, even though it wasn't the nicest stadium in the world. But
yeah. I don't actually have any memories of the old exhibition stadium. I that was before my time.
yeah, I remember seeing Guns N' Roses and Metallica there and just being frightened because I thought I was going to get killed because
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
the Montreal show before that there was a riot. So
Oh,
so and when we
so
got there, there was police on horseback with shields and guns and SWAT teams ready for anything. And I was pretty
did
sure
the
we were going to be in the middle of something really bad, but it went off without a hitch, and it was great. So
well the cops had guns? I mean, they had their guns drawn. Like,
they didn't.
were they on horseback? Or they have
They
rifles?
were some of them were on horseback with shields and clubs in their hands, and they were ready for the worst of it, just in case. Because I don't know if you remember Guns N' Roses actually causing a few riots back in their early days. But
Was it because Axel was late?
no, something happened in Montreal. The Metallica got hurt by a flash pot, and the drummer's
Oh,
or the guitar player's arm got burned,
okay.
and he had to get off early. And then Axel ended their show early because his voice wasn't sounding good. So they had a riot in Montreal. And when they rescheduled the Toronto show, everybody was like, "Ooh, They were ready for anything." Let's just say the powers that be were ready for anything. They were expecting it, but it didn't happen. It was actually a pretty good evening. Um,
Interesting. I wonder. I don't know if that says more about Guns N' Roses or Montreal.
I'm not sure, but I thought Vancouver would. I heard Vancouver used to have some riots after the Vancouver Canucks games, but
Did
but then I think Montreal did too when they won the Stanley Cup. I think there was a riot there too. I don't remember. I think so. I think I remember
well,
hearing.
or Vancouver rioted when they lost.
Yeah, I remember that. Um,
Yeah,
was it when they lost to the Rangers in
can't remember.
'94? I think. I don't know. But anyway,
I think it was later than that.
yeah, maybe. And I know they made the Cup Finals again in '11 and lost to Boston.
I think that's the one that they rioted.
Would they? Yeah. Oh, yeah, because that went to Game 7 too. I forgot about that. But anyway, I'm a big hockey fan too, so I don't know if you are, but
Not really. I'm learning to be because I'm living in the suburbs for a while, and when you're in the suburbs in the wintertime and you're home Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Finally on Thursday, it's like I get cabin fever. I don't idle especially well. So I'm like, well, I gotta get out. I gotta go somewhere. And I'm in Burlington. There's really not anywhere to go. There's a pub downtown where you can go watch the game, and I'll go watch the Jets or go watch the Maple Leafs. And so I've been learning, I'm getting my sort of Boy Scouts badge as a Canadian to learn how to watch hockey in a suburban bar. I'm learning.
I prefer junior hockey myself, but that's just me
Oh,
because I worked in it for so many years. But I'd
interesting.
I'd be going to OHL games. You got the Brantford Bulldogs, which probably aren't too far from you, and Niagara Ice Dogs. So if you want to go to a game without too big of a crowd or
Yeah,
not so much fuss, it's fun hockey, and you never know which one of those guys are going to make the NHL one day.
yeah.
So I've seen many guys in junior
There,
hockey that made it. So
I went and saw a Marlies game last year and I really enjoyed it.
yeah, those are fun too. Those are fun. It's a nice arena there. So
I think they were playing against a team from Indianapolis, and I want to say that who the goalie was PK Subban's brother.
oh, Malcolm, yeah,
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 that was cool.
he played for the Belleville Bulls back in the day.
Hmm.
I saw him play up in Barrie once against the Colts. But if you're in that part of Ontario, there's lots of teams nearby. There's Guelph and Kitchener, which aren't too far, and Niagara,
Oh man,
Brantford,
so it's all close. Yeah.
Brampton, Oshawa, Barrie, Peterborough, if you want to make the ride. But yeah, there's like you probably played a lot of those arenas too, actually, I'm thinking.
So
I know you played the Molson Center because I saw you open for Blue Rodeo once
okay,
at the Molson Center in Barrie. So I remember that. You
right.
played that's an OHL rink.
Okay.
And yeah, they play a lot of OHL rinks, Blue Rodeo. I've seen them in Ottawa actually.
Hmm.
At, um actually no, they played where the Senators play. But
Ah,
I've seen Blue Rodeo many times too.
yeah,
Um, I've always liked the way Blue Rodeo invites their opening act on stage at the end to jam with them. I've always thought that was pretty neat.
it's a classy move.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that when you opened for them?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like it's it's a really nice touch, and those guys have done a really interesting. It must be deliberate, where they foster community in a way that I admire, and they always have. Like I'm actually a real fan of that band. Like I really love. I love everything. I love the way they've curated their um, their whole approach to playing music. Like the things, there's gonna be the Everly Brothers, and there's gonna be the Beatles, and there's gonna be like Graham Parsons and psychedelic hippie country, and there's gonna be R&B, and there's gonna be and they've just kind of blended
Right.
the way that like you say, they invite their opening acts to come up, but it's just that, although it's that too, they just really reach out to the community wherever they are.
Yeah.
Like Melissa has been playing with them for the last year or so, like their whole like 30th anniversary of 5 days in July
Oh wow.
tour.
Yeah.
And so she's been singing all of because a lot of the vocal parts on that record are Sarah McLaughlan. And
Yeah, I
so
was gonna say
obviously Sarah's not out doing it. So Melissa's been doing a bunch of it. But they're always like bringing people up, who's around you, whose friends are at the show, and at the end for the encore, it's like everybody sus magically appears on stage, and it's just a good thing. The idea of fostering community within music industry, because we tend to get, there's a lot of like sort of disgruntled confusion and loneliness and
right.
feelings of isolation and obsolescence in the music world. It's nice that somebody reminds us that we're actually in this together, and Blue Rodeo's been so good at making that a priority.
Absolutely. I love that. That's probably one of the things I really love about that band. I mean, I always find their recording technique kind of interesting. I remember reading about how they recorded 5 days in July. Like they basically recorded a set up a bunch of microphones around an old farmhouse or something like that.
Yeah,
I read, and it basically, there were dogs running around, cats, whatever happened. People were coming in and just,
yeah,
singing background vocals or whatever. And I love the sound of that record. It sounds so natural.
yeah.
It's got such an
I
amazing.
agree.
I mean, when you hear the piano in it, you can tell it's like an old upright piano up against the wall somewhere, and it just sounds
Yeah,
amazing. Like it reminds you of school. When you
yeah,
took music class, there was always a ratty upright piano in your classroom, and
yeah,
you can tell that's what it is. But I've always loved the way they record.
yeah. They curate well
Yeah,
in so many ways. I don't know. I know them. I've known those guys for a long time, but I did some touring with them back in the day, obviously like opening for them, but also in the band. At one point, Greg was sick. Greg Keeler was sick, and he couldn't do a tour, so I ended up going out as Greg, kind of like
yeah.
singing all the backup vocal parts and playing the guitar and stuff. And so I kind of a little bit of a snapshot into their world, but I don't really know how they how they operate. Like the relationship between Greg and Jim, I think is really special and really interesting. And it's such the how has it been 30 years, something like that, right? Maybe more, 35 years that they've been playing together. And I assume that there's a lot of communication that just happens by osmosis where they don't have to say much anymore. And they seem to understand they have a thing and it's mysterious and beautiful.
And there different ways of singing really complement each other. Like Jim's got this beautiful voice that just
Mhm.
I could listen to him sing all day. And then Greg's got this like kind of rough voice, but it's the way they sing together is just blends beautifully.
I mean, it's that duality that you would find. I mean, Graham Parsons and Emmy Lou, they had that.
Yeah,
And, John and Paul kind of had that, especially
yeah,
later on when their
yeah.
identities were more pronounced. Like there was that sort of, and it's such a sweet thing. And there's even Crosby, Stills, Nash,
Yeah.
there because it's the combination, it's a beautiful combination. And it's, you reduce it to the individual elements and it's also really cool. But the thing that happens when it comes together, yeah.
No, amazing stuff. I really appreciate you joining me and talking about music.
Yeah.
I could talk about music all day, and it sounds like you could too, because you're just as much of a fan
Somewhat.
as you are a musician.
Yeah, I am. I have a, I don't always, I'm not always at peace with the music industry. And sometimes talking about the industry or even talking about or listening to new records makes me think too much about my job and too much about the industry. And it makes me cranky, which is the interesting effect that's had on me is that I'm listening to a lot of old music and I have to
Yeah,
be like, my brother sends me like, you got to listen to the new Casey and Clayton. Okay, I'll listen to that. Holy shit, that's really good. Or you got to listen to the new Kurt Vile record. Oh my God, that's really good. Um, but unless I'm prompted by people that I trust and care about, I will just drown in a lake of like dad rock.
yeah. There's no such thing. Well, I guess there is such thing as bad rock, but I don't know. I'm the same way. There's a lot of new stuff I really like, but um, the thing I'm really trying to promote is I've interviewed a lot of classic bands and artists through this channel. Um, but I like to promote that they are still making music.
Yeah,
They are still
yeah, I
making
appreciate
music
that.
and they're making great music, even better music today. And
Yeah,
that's one thing I really like to promote. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, what have they been doing for the past 30 years?" I'm like, they've still been working, believe it or not. Just because it doesn't get played on the radio doesn't mean they're not working.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a really important point. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to feel like you're in the game if people assume you're not, even though you're still making music. It's hard to
Yeah.
feel like there's any point. Um, I Sloan are, yeah, we could spend all night talking about Sloan. If, but I find the fact that those guys have managed to keep the quality of their work as high as they have sort of baffling to me. There's certain records I'm just like I can't believe you guys made this record. Like just
Yep.
Commonwealth, a record I couldn't like. It's just a steady stream of amazing songs and interesting production choices one after the other. I suppose when you have four songwriters in the band, you have a bit of a leg up, but even still,
And
so
everybody
close.
plays multiple instruments too, I think too. So that
You,
helps a lot too. But yeah, I just find I remember the days when I used to get excited when a great band put out a new record. And I still get excited today. Like, I mean, Honeymoon Suite just put out a new album and I listen to it over and over again. It's incredible.
really?
It is really
Amazing.
good. And
Okay, all right.
they're still writing great songs.
Amazing.
I interviewed Lee Aaron a few months ago. She's got a new
Yeah,
record out and I really like it a lot. Like, that's
interesting.
the things Biff Naked. I interviewed her recently. She's still making
Yeah,
great music. Like, that's the point I like to make. Like, just, I mean, they didn't just have their best days back, you know,
Right. But it's easy,
they're still
yeah,
at it, you
you
know?
can sort of understand why people feel like they had their best days, because it's when you make a record, you put your heart and soul into it. I know there's sort of cliched metaphors about them being like children and they love them all equally.
Yeah,
So let's assume for a minute that that's true. Well, you get a lot of attention when you're in the spotlight, when you're young and you're having hit records. And so you feel like,
yeah,
oh, that must be the that must be my good stuff because it's getting all this attention. And because your objectivity is kind of shot when your head's up your ass about being an artist.
yeah,
And so it's hard to know what's good or what's not good. You're constantly making things that you hope are the best thing you ever made. You're hoping that
sure.
you're keeping yourself to a high standard. But then, you just, well, beyond that, you can't really be the arbiter of the quality of your work because you don't have any objectivity. So it's easy to just fall into the trap of thinking that your best work is the work that got you the most attention, which is probably the work you did 10 or 20 years ago, if you're an artist of like that you're talking.
Yeah,
So I think that they're doing people a solid by reminding the world that like, hey, this stuff is still really good because the artists themselves sometimes don't know. And we don't know what we're doing. We don't know if it's any good. And we're like chronic, like self-doubters. And like, the notion of imposter syndrome is abused a lot in this day and age. But I think artists of our vintage, we don't know if there's any reason to do the thing we do.
I kind of blame the old-fashioned media for doing that because it seems like, well, radio I think is still viable, but it seems like they take people like Honeymoon Suite and Lee Aaron and Blue Rodeo and they go, you guys are the retro, you guys are over here. There's radio stations to play that. And this is the new stuff, and you guys are not in it. And they
I mean, I
just,
think that's true, but I also think the reason for that is that pop music, and I use the term loosely, but like modern popular music that enters
right,
into the culture and has an effect on the culture, it's largely its function in society is to be the soundtrack to the lives of young people,
right,
kind of, right? Like,
sure,
like historically, you go back through the decades and the years, and when things are hits, when they're at their peak, it's probably because a bunch of kids between the ages of 18 and 25, or even younger, 15 and 25,
yeah,
it's the soundtrack to their coming of age. And
yeah,
they, and there just comes a point when you're demographically not likely to make the soundtrack to the coming to people's coming of age anymore because that ship has sailed. And so then what's your function? And unfortunately, there's oldies radio
yeah,
fulfill the needs of boomers and Xers and silent generation listeners who still want to hear music from their heyday. But also, um, there's various kinds of music. The Americana world has sort of emerged in the last 15, 20 years as a place where country and blues and folk and singer-songwriters go to continue feeling relevant in a community after they're not making pop records anymore. And so I think demographics has a lot to do with it. I try not to take that personally. And I do think, back to we talked about Blue Rodeo, these artists who have managed to make the kind of music that ages so gracefully, ages so well.
right.
Maybe that's because there's country and there's blues and there's, I don't know, like certain kinds of music tend to age in a more graceful way than others for whatever reason.
Yeah. I still listen to that White Horse album I bought at your show a long time ago. I have it on my in my car and I love listening to your cover of Love Cats.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite covers. Um, and I can't turn it off, but I like the truck driving song too. The Long
I'm
Haul
not aware.
Drivers. That's one of my
Oh,
favorites too.
is that in the Blood's Too Rich?
Yeah, I
Is
think
that
so.
record? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even a White Horse record. It's a White Falcon record.
Oh, that's right too. But I don't know. I love it. I remember buying it at your show when you opened for Blue Rodeo, and I was just like, because I like buying the opening acts stuff and getting into them because it exposes me to new music, and
Yeah.
I
Right.
still like discovering new music and new bands, and I find like, hey, I found something, you know, and I like to let other people know about it too. So, but that's just me, and that's why I do what I do, because I'm passionate about music anyway in the first place. So, and it's brought me to talking to people like yourself, and made me an even bigger fan. Um,
Amazing. Fantastic.
anyway, I can't thank you enough for joining me again. I appreciate it. Good luck on the rest of the tour. Um,
Thank you very much.
I'm glad to see all those Canadian dates. It's great to see you coming out to the East Coast too. I think
Yeah,
the East Coast gets ignored sometimes by some of the big tours, but it's good to see you guys coming out here.
I understand. It does get ignored.
Anyway, take care of yourself. Best to you and your wife and your family. And
Thank you.
maybe we'll
Thank you.
see you in Moncton.
Yeah,
Make
give
the
me a poke when you're around the show, and maybe we'll get a chance to say hi.
That'd be amazing. Thanks. Take care, Luke.
Yeah, cool, man. Thank you.
Bye.